In this tutorial, I will give you an overview of a web-based tool called ExitTicket, which allows you to formatively and summatively assess your students. Begin by going to the website ExitTix.com and clicking on the link to get a free teacher account. Fill out your information and skip the portion that talks about a coupon code. Once you have an account, you can log in on the login screen. Once you're in your ExitTicket account, you'll be taken to a dashboard that looks like this. On your dashboard, this spot may be empty initially, with an option to create a new class. Begin by creating a class and filling in the information required in these fields, such as your school, your course, class name, and you don't have to create a real class ID number, but you can put something here in this space just to fill this space in. Once you have all of your classes created, they'll appear here in this dashboard, and you can view a class to begin. Once you've opened up a particular class period, you can always navigate to one of the other class periods by selecting the option next to Teacher Mode at the top, allowing you to switch to another class. Otherwise, from this particular class dashboard, you can begin by adding students to your class or creating an assessment. Any assessments that you have previously created will be here on this screen if they are active for completion by the students today. Otherwise, we can press either this New Assessment button here or the New Assessment button here at the top. Once you create a new assessment, you'll be given 4 options. A Quicket is kind of like a quick exit ticket, which doesn't require you to fill in a lot of detailed information, just if you wanted to quickly assess your students' understanding of a topic. Launch is to get some preliminary information about your students' background knowledge prior to teaching. Practice is a way to assess your students mid-lesson to see how they're understanding the concept, and an exit ticket will allow you to assess them after the fact. For demonstration purposes, I'll show you what it looks like to fill out an exit ticket. Selecting any of the ticket options will bring up a window that looks like this, and you'll start by filling in the information required in these fields. You can give your assessment a title here, something that will be easy to identify later on. And you can decide some of these customization options for your assessment below. You can decide if you want the assessment to be timed, and if you don't, you can leave this selected on Not Timed. You can decide if you want the correct answer to be revealed to students, whether or not they answer the question correctly or incorrectly. You can have them see their final score once they've completed the exit ticket, or leave that information off the final screen. And you can also choose to randomize the order of the questions, which may be beneficial if students are taking the same assessment at the same time and you're concerned about them seeing each other's screens. You can decide when you want the assessment to be published, whether that be on a single day, and you can select the date in advance, or set up a duration that the assessment will be active for. And you also have the option to publish this in draft mode. From here, you can select which class period you'd like to assign this to. You'll notice that when you try to check a box for another class period, it will tell you that you can't assign this to more than one class at a time. However, if you do create an assessment for a particular class period, there is a way to duplicate that assessment on another screen and make it available to other class periods as well. From here, you can move on to actually creating the questions on your assessment. So you can move to the next tab that says Questions. And basically you can decide what type of question you'd like to ask. If you select Item Bank here, any assessments that you've previously created will show up here in this list, and you can actually take questions from previously created assessments and add them to this assessment. Otherwise, you can select from multiple choice, true, false, or free response. And all three of these question types will allow you to input the correct answer. So I can start with multiple choice here. And descriptive tag is just a way to help you identify that question later on as an item in the item bank that you can select from. So if you put a descriptive title tag in here, make it something that's easy for you to identify if you choose to use this question in other assessments. From here, you can decide if the question is an easy, medium, or difficult question. This doesn't really affect anything, so if you want to just keep it selected on the medium by default, that's fine. You can also, in the case of multiple choice questions, choose to randomize the answer choices as well. And in the text box is where you'll actually type in your question. Below, you can actually insert some of your question options if you had selected multiple choice. You can also add additional options and be sure to check which answer is the correct answer before moving on. Something you may notice when you are creating your questions is in addition to adding text here, there's also an insert image button here as well where you can upload an image from your computer to enhance the question. If you're familiar with HTML embed codes, you also can select HTML, paste a code right here for some content, and that content will appear here as part of the question as well. At any point when you create a question, you can select the preview tab and it will show you what this question will actually look like to students. Over on the left is where all of the questions for your quiz will populate. You can go back and edit any of these questions at any time. You also have the ability to duplicate them if that's easier for you, if you're just modifying a few words here and there, or you can delete the question altogether. So I'm going to go to add another question. I can add a true, false. Same idea, type your question here and then select whether the correct answer is true or false. And then finally, for free response, you type in your question and you can type in the correct answer down here. What they are explaining in the note is that if there are multiple correct answers or maybe multiple possibilities for the way that a student could actually word their response, just put a semicolon between each of those options and then it will recognize any of those options as being correct when it actually grades the student's responses. This may be something to take into account for spelling errors, or if this is a math assessment, putting in both the number and the word form. And then once you're finished, you can actually save and close out of this. You could also preview the entire assessment to see what it looks like before you close out. And here's an example of an assessment that I have already created here. And what I can do now is if I go back to my classes on the main screen and select assessments. For example, here is one assessment that I had created. What I can do then is next to it, I can click on duplicate and it will create a duplicate of that, which I can then go in and edit and assign to a different class period. So there is the ability to not have to reinvent the wheel and just create one copy. Maybe you want to tweak a question here and there depending on what class period you're assigning it to, but it'll save you a lot of work if you can just sort of clone each of those assessments for each particular class period. So I'll go back to my classes window on the home screen and I want to go back into my class here, and at this point, since I have an assessment created, now I would like to add students to this class. So once a student has been added to your class, they're permanently here in your class list until you manually get rid of them. The nice thing is by clicking on Add Students here, it will generate a class code, and students can actually register themselves to be part of your class. So this will actually save you a lot of hassle. You won't have to manually input names. By all means, if you want to manually enter the names yourself, because you want the names formatted a certain way or whatever your reason, you still have the ability to do that from the student screen. But if you want to just select class code here, just have your students go to ExitTicket.com and tap on class code. So if I was to go to a student view here, unlike where you would log into this, your students will select class code, and here is where they will enter that class code. And basically it will just walk them through creating an account. So it's going to tell them you will be joining this particular class period. If this is something that's being used in multiple classes, they may just log in with an existing account, and then they will be enrolled in multiple accounts, and all of those accounts will show up on their dashboard. However, if this is the first time they're using ExitTicket, they can select I'm new and I need an account. And the students have the ability to enter their usernames themselves. It may be beneficial if they just use their Google logins. However, if there's another system that you want to use for your class, you can have them enter their username that way. When you actually go to see the scores, it will display the student's actual name. So this part is not important. This is just their way of remembering their username and password. And once they've entered a username, they can enter a password. It would be best if they use their regular Chrome Google password as well, just for the sake of remembering this login information. It will ask them if they have a student ID number. They can enter this, but if they don't know it, they can just continue on. And then they'll be asked to put in their first and last name. You as the teacher actually have the ability to add their student IDs later on after the fact. So if for some reason you needed their student IDs, that is something that you can enter even if the students don't enter it themselves. So right now, since I'm logged in here, it says I have no assessments for today. That is because the assessment that was created here in my teacher dashboard it's active for today, but until I actually press the start button, the students won't be able to take this assessment. So this is nice because you can then ensure that the students don't actually take your assessments in advance. So if I do press start here, on my teacher dashboard, it will actually show me how my class is doing as a whole. I have one student in this class, so you can just see one student listed here, but for all of the students that are active in your class, you will see a little student panel for each of them listed below, and it will show you kind of a color coding system letting you know their performance on that assessment in real time while they're taking it. So now on the student screen, switching back over here, it changed from saying there's no tests for today to now I can see this assessment that has been assigned to me. So I can press start and I can go through and answer these questions. So I'll begin like the student and type in my answer. And I chose in my teacher settings to tell the student if they were right or wrong after each question. So it's giving me a notification that I was correct. If I go back into my teacher dashboard now, you can see that the student tile is lit up in green, and it's saying that they actually answered the first question correctly. 1 out of 1. So if you had 25 students in your class, you'd see how many out of 25 answered number 1 on your assessment correctly, and so on and so forth as they progressed through this assessment. If you go to intervention hot list, you would be able to see the students that may need some extra assistance. And superstars, once they get through here, your highest ranked students will show up and their score. If this was something that you actually wanted to project for your whole class to see, at the top you could go to where it says teacher mode here and switch to projector mode. And the nice thing about this is instead of actually displaying the students' names, it generates kind of this like temporary little ID number. So the students will still be able to see as a whole how their class is doing without being embarrassed by seeing their score tied to their name here. And if you don't want this to be projected for the whole class to see, you can always switch back to teacher mode, and then in real time you can see how your class is doing. So as students, they can go through here, answer these questions. If they're wrong, it will tell them they're incorrect, and it will give them a final score if you chose to display a final score for them at the end. It will also show them, once they finish completely, how that score for the day kind of ranked in comparison to maybe some other assessments that they took that week. And any other available assessments will show up here below. They can switch to scorebook, and I don't have a lot of scores, but if they did have several scores, they could actually see all that data from other assessments that they had taken. And then here on my dashboard, I can see student by student how they performed on every question and get an idea of how the class did as a whole. So if you switch to reteach now, what you can actually do is show the students the question, and you can talk about it and especially focus on some of those questions that maybe students struggled with. Keep in mind this does display students' names here with their answer choices, so this may not be something that you want to show them. Another nice thing is this student admin option. You have the ability here to reset passwords, which is really nice. So if students do forget their passwords, you have the ability to do that, and it will just generate a temporary password that you can give to students. As new students enter your class, just simply click on that Add Student button again and present them with the class code, and they can join at a later time. And what you can actually do is if you finished an assessment, you can click on End Class and log students out, and that way they no longer have access to those questions anymore. So if we go back to our assessments now, once we have some results here, we can go back to the scorebook tab here, and it will generate a list of all the students, their overall scores, and you can export these scores out in an Excel spreadsheet if you wanted to collect that data on an Excel spreadsheet. Your Students tab here will allow you to edit some information. So like I mentioned before, on multiple screens you can reset passwords, but if you had wanted to enter a student ID, or if students entered any of this other information incorrectly, you as the teacher have the ability to override this information. You can also manually add students instead of having them enter a class code and create your class roster that way. If at any time you want to edit the name of your class, you can go to Edit Class. Assessments will bring you back to see any assessments that you've assigned to your class and the results of your group as a whole. And Calendar will allow you to see how many assessments you have scheduled and then what day they are active on. So hopefully this tutorial has been beneficial to give you a preview of how you can use ExitTicket to assess your students.